2010s was the decade where fantasy shows really leveled up, thanks to streaming services and cable networks trying to cash in on that Game of Thrones buzz. But while some shows hit it big, others faded into the shadows, canceled too soon, mismarketed, or just plain overlooked. So in this part 4 of our ongoing quest to unearth the most underrated fantasy shows out there, we're spotlighting some of those magical, messy, and occasionally misunderstood gems of the 2010s. And to keep things flowing nicely, we're listing everything in chronological order, from early 2010s cult favorites to late decade classics. The Gates. The Gates was like Desperate Housewives, if Wisteria Lane were crawling with vampires, werewolves, and witches. This series centered around a seemingly perfect gated community where everyone's hiding something, especially supernatural secrets. The story kicks off when a new police chief moves in with his family, only to realize he's landed in a suburban twilight zone. You've got vampires trying to live clean, shapeshifters navigating teen drama, and mysterious magical forces simmering beneath the surface. The show had real potential, blending soap opera melodrama with supernatural intrigue. Unfortunately, it only lasted one season, but it's definitely a show that deserves a second look. Lost Girl. Lost Girl was one of those cult hits that quietly built a loyal fandom, and it's easy to see why. The show followed Bo, a bisexual succubus who discovers she's part of the hidden Fae world and has to choose between the light and the dark. Spoiler, she picks neither, because Bo does things her way. What followed was a mashup of supernatural politics, found family bonding, and cheeky dialogue that walked the line between sexy and sincere. If you missed it the first time around, Lost Girl is a fun female-led fantasy full of heart, leather jackets, and just the right amount of weird. Haven. Loosely based on Stephen King's The Colorado Kid, Haven blended small-town mystery with supernatural chaos in a way that was equal parts cozy and creepy. The story follows Audrey Parker, an FBI agent who arrives in the sleepy town of Haven, Maine, only to find that its residents are plagued by the Troubles, weird, often dangerous powers that manifest without warning. Each episode is a new mystery of the week, with roots in some very personal and often tragic abilities, while the overarching plot slowly peels back layers of Audrey's own connection to the town. Haven ran for 5 seasons and still somehow flew under the radar, one of the more underrated King-inspired series out there. Camelot. Camelot was Starz' gritty, brooding answer to the fantasy TV boom. This take on the Arthurian legend starred Jamie Campbell Bower as King Arthur, and Ava Green absolutely stealing the show as Morgan, Arthur's power-hungry half-sister. It had all the fantasy trappings: swords, magic, prophecy, royal drama, but with a more adult, sensual edge that leaned hard into palace intrigue and moral gray zones. The show looked good, had a killer score, and wasn't afraid to get weird with the myth. Sadly, it only lasted one season, but for fans of dark, moody medieval fantasy, Camelot definitely earns its spot as a forgotten gem of the era. The 9 Lives of Chloe King. File this one under YA fantasy with big early 2010s energy. The 9 Lives of Chloe King followed an ordinary teenager who suddenly discovers she's part of an ancient race of cat people known as the Mai. She's got heightened reflexes, sharp claws, and, you guessed it, 9 lives. Chloe is suddenly thrown into a world of hidden societies, deadly assassins, and love triangles, naturally, as she learns she might be the key to her people's survival. It only got 1 season, but it left behind a small following and some serious "this could have been huge" potential. Just another show that deserved better. The Secret Circle. The Secret Circle conjured up a world of teenage witches and small-town mystery, all wrapped up in that early 2010s supernatural drama aesthetic. Based on the book series by the Vampire Diaries author L.J. Smith, this series follows Cassie, a teenager who moves to a small town only to discover she's a witch, and part of a secret coven of other magical teens. It had all the CW fantasy staples: a mysterious past, magical bloodlines, ancient prophecies, spellbound love triangles, and parents who are definitely up to something sinister. Unfortunately, it was canceled after 1 season, just as things were heating up. A classic could have been the next big thing situation. Atlantis. Atlantis was the BBC's attempt to recapture that Merlin-style magic, and while it didn't quite hit the same highs, it definitely had its own charming mythological flair. The show followed Jason, who ends up in the lost city of Atlantis and teams up with legendary figures like Hercules, reimagined as a lovable drunk, and Pythagoras, the math guy turned sidekick. It was a mashup of Greek myths, sword and sandal adventure, and fantasy monster of the week mayhem. The tone was campy, the costumes were fun, and the world had a real throwback vibe. It was a fun ride while it lasted, and it's absolutely a hidden gem for fans of myth meets fantasy storytelling. Forever. Forever was one of those shows with a killer concept and a lot of heart, despite flying way under the radar. The series followed Dr. Henry Morgan, a New York City medical examiner who just so happens to be immortal. Every time he dies, he reappears in a nearby body of water, completely naked, of course. While solving weekly murder cases, Henry also searches for the truth behind his curse and navigates his own complicated past, stretching back centuries. It was part crime procedural, part historical flashback fantasy, and had a vibe all of its own. Galavant. Fantasy meet musical comedy. Galavant was pure chaotic brilliance, a medieval fairy tale turned Broadway parody that ran for 2 wildly underrated seasons. It followed the titular knight Galavant on a quest for revenge, love, and occasional redemption, all while characters sang their feelings in gleefully self-aware show tunes. Created by Dan Fogelman, with music by Disney legend Alan Menken, the show blended swords, slapstick, and sass like nothing else on TV. The humor was meta, and the songs were legitimately catchy. It wasn't built for mainstream appeal, but for fantasy fans with a musical streak, Galavant was a total gift. The Shannara Chronicles. The Shannara Chronicles brought high fantasy to the small screen, complete with elves, demons, and a post-apocalyptic twist. Based on the novels by Terry Brooks, the show took place in a future where magic had replaced modern civilization. It followed a young elf-human hybrid named Will, a mysterious druid Alanon, a rebellious human nomad Eritrea, and an elven princess Amberly, as they set out to stop an ancient evil from destroying the Four Lands. The series leaned into YA drama with love triangles and CW-worthy faces, but it also had sweeping landscapes, slick fight scenes, and a decent amount of world building. It only lasted 2 seasons, but it had big ambitions, and deserves some credit for bringing fantasy back to cable TV. Emerald City. Emerald City was NBC's dark Wizard of Oz reimagining, and wow, did it go bold. The show turned Dorothy into a hardened nurse caught in a war-torn, steampunk-infused version of Oz. The Yellow Brick Road was now a warpath, the wizard was a tech-obsessed tyrant, and witches were full-blown political power players. It looked incredible. The visuals were cinematic, the costume design was next level, and the overall aesthetic was pure dark fantasy. But unfortunately, it was probably too weird for network TV and only lasted 1 season. Still, if you're into alternate universe retellings with a heavy dose of angst, Emerald City is worth the detour. Honorable mentions. Before we get to our final pick, here are a few honorable mentions. Fantasy shows from the 2010s that didn't quite make the main lineup, but still deserve a little spotlight. Hemlock Grove brought gothic horror to Netflix with werewolves and vampires. Once Upon a Time in Wonderland gave us a trippy spin-off full of talking rabbits, magical portals, and an underrated take on Alice. Nowhere Boys was an Aussie teen fantasy about 4 boys who return from a hike to find they've been erased from reality. And there's also Dominion, the post-apocalyptic angel war drama, which delivered wings, prophecies, and a whole lot of biblical baggage. Each one brought something unique and weird to the fantasy scene. Midnight Texas. And finally, we have this supernatural soap opera set in a town where literally everyone has a secret, and none of them are normal. There's a vampire, a witch, a psychic, an angel, and a talking cat, all just trying to live in peace in their weird little town. But of course, things don't stay peaceful for long. The show followed Manfred, a psychic who stumbles into Midnight and ends up helping defend it against everything from demonic invasions to shady government agencies. Was it a little cheesy? Absolutely. But it was also fun and totally unafraid to go full bonkers. It ran for 2 seasons, and honestly, it deserved way more love than it got. Do you agree with our picks for these forgotten 2010s fantasy shows? Are there any series you'd like to add to this list? Let us know in the comments. Check out the first 3 parts of this video on our channel, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this.